then you're seeing it in terms of Dhamma, or the way it is, rather than in terms of how I'm breathing and my breath and all the conditions that arise from that assumption. My breathing, my breath, my body, into being the Bhutto, the refuge, Bhutang Saranam Gacchami, awakened consciousness of an individual. We're all separate individuals at this moment. You know, this is a seeming conventional reality of this moment. I'm here and you're over there. But we're not emphasizing that I myself is sitting here and you there, but we're all engaging in this mindfulness practice to be aware of the way it is wherever your body is sitting, you know, whatever conditions you're experiencing. And then in meditation, we start with the most obvious conditions in the present, the posture and the breath. Inhaling on pu, exhaling on to, so that you're thinking the word while you're observing the inhalation. It'll keep you from wandering in thought, and then exhaling with the syllable to, and just see what, you know, just try it for a few minutes, just to get some momentary experience at this time with it. So this evening, the first night, I know traveling and moving from your homes to this salubrious venue, and also settling in, so you're probably tired. But also this take time to just give a few reflections on this event. The guided meditation was an attempt to just give you basic, for those who've already developed practice, also those who have never. I know that there's so many stories about meditation going around, you know, both it being a wonderful experience or a horrible one. And some people think meditation is very difficult, and that they're not ready for it, or they're, they have doubts about their ability to do it. But Ajahn Chah always referred to it as a holiday of the heart, Pakpon Tang Jitjai in Thai. And so I remember when I first heard him say that, then I thought, how do you translate Pakpon Tang Jitjai? It's a holiday of the heart. And I thought, holiday? I'm not having a holiday, this is hard work. Because my attitude was very much involved with very willful, intense practices, and the whole psychological mechanisms in me were always goal-oriented, achieving, proving myself, getting something, getting somewhere. And one thing with meditation is that attitude does not help. All the kind of go for it, get it, conquer the kilesas, work hard and get a good result. With all this willfulness, it was, I had plenty of willpower in those days, and I could make myself do all kinds of things, but the result was never very peaceful or certainly not liberating in any way. And in Ajahn Chah's reflection of holiday of the heart, and begun to think a holiday is where, you like holidays because you can rest. You don't have to try and prove yourself. You're having a holiday today. Holiday of the heart means of the mind and the heart, the citta. So just contemplate that. Then notice your own attitudes about Buddhist meditation, whatever they might be. Whether you're expecting or dreading, or you think it's hard work, or you think you can do it or you can't. Whatever you think, just be the Bhutto, the observer. This is my advice. Be that Bhutto is at ease with everything, accepts everything. Buddha doesn't, it's not about picking and choosing and preferences and liking and disliking and trying to get something or get rid of something. This sense of awareness, Bhutto, is totally accepting of everything, whatever, the pain in your body or the pleasure, the good thoughts, bad thoughts, the happiness, sadness, despair, whatever emotional qualities you're experiencing. Bhutto is not judgmental, not condemning, not criticizing, but noting, discerning. So this is an attitude I found very helpful in my own, to deal with my own character, which was, very American conditioned personality. Being American, you're brought up to be a winner, to get somewhere, prove yourself. It's all about competition. And even though American values are all very high-minded about equality and egalitarianism and so forth, the result of this is that it's endlessly competitive. And you're brought up, you're to compete, and who's ever, runs faster or is taller, whatever, you're always comparing yourself with those who you think are better off or can do things better than you can. And then also one can look down on those who aren't as good as you think you are. With meditation, our relationship to this ego is to observe it, not to reinforce it or to judge it, just to notice. To be the Bhutto, the knower of the way it is. And then the vipassana reflection is always, all conditions are impermanent. Now this is all conditioned phenomena. This means everything, the body, the posture of the body, the sensations of the body, the senses, what you see, hear, smell, taste, touch, think, all your emotions, memories, the whole psychophysiological conditions that we're experiencing now. It's all about impermanence, anicca. That includes both of them, from the very subtle to the very coarse. Because conditioned phenomena has infinite varieties, qualities, quantities, and so forth. It's forever changing, and it always moves like your breath. You have inhalation, which conditions its opposite, the exhalation. At this time in society, the economic crash that everyone's experiencing, especially in Europe or America, where the idea of progress was the ideal that we all operated from, that everything was going to get better and better. And that progress is just, moving from better to better to better. And of course a Buddhist who knows Dhamma knows that progress, you can only progress to a point and then it goes the other way, just like your breath. And, you can only inhale so far, then you have to exhale. One depends on the other. And so this applies to all conditioned phenomena, whether it's economics, political, social, whether it's through sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, whether it's emotional, or it's anything physical, the sun, the moon, the stars, the universe. Now, the Buddha pointed to not to that things that are so remote, so out of our direct ability to observe their changingness, to the most obvious realities of the here and now, this physical body and its mental activities. Once we understand from this much, then the rest applies to the whole universe. It's extrapolated to the on the macrocosmic scale. But the microcosm of one's own conscious moments at this time, within the restriction that we're all experiencing through the physical forms that we live with, this is what we learn from this form here, the way it is, with the mental states, whatever they might be, good, bad, inspired, depressed, right, wrong, emotions, memories, sensory contact in its various forms, is when you pay attention, and this is mindfulness. The Buddha knows the way it is. All conditions are impermanent. So these words like Buddha and Dhammo, these go together, Buddha and Dhamma. And Buddha then implies, like you can have a Buddha rupa, like behind me on the piano is a Buddha image. And so, so the Buddha always has this, Buddha rupa is a form, human form. So what does that mean to you? Is it represent some historical sage of the past that can do that? The Buddha, this is the Dhammajaka Buddha teaching the Four Noble Truths, the mudras and everything. But it is a human, iconic human form, but it represents the human individual in a state of awareness, awakened attention. If you notice that all Buddha images have this sense of attentiveness, awakened consciousness. They're peaceful forms usually, Buddha images. And this is an icon that we use in Buddhism, but in other religions they don't seem to have such a form. Like when you compare it to Christian symbolism with the crucifix or the various forms of passions in European sculpture. I remember being in Paris one time, walking through the park near the Eiffel Tower and these beautiful public parks with all their huge kind of bronze sculptures of warriors, male figures in state of passion and fighting and anger and fearsome male figures, and then the female figures were usually of women, very haughty, kind of very unpleasant, kind of like queens and upper class ladies that think they're better than the rest. So you go through looking at these sculptures, public sculptures in park in Paris, and it has a certain effect on the mind. The male figure as a warrior, fighting, angry, conquering, and the female figure as a very authoritative, haughty, presumptuous form of a woman's figure. And then we went to the Guimet Museum in Paris, which was nearby, where they have the Oriental art. And so we walked into the Guimet Museum, where they have a very good collection of Khmer Buddha images from Cambodia. And of course French are very good at setting these images off with lighting, and the most serene looking forms of Khmer sculpture of Buddha in stone, and these represented the human form in the state of attention. Was not a warrior, was not acting like they're superior. There's not a king or a queen or somebody important. It's not trying to promote itself as through passion and emotion, but through calm and peace. And this is Bhutto then, this word, this mantra, Bhutto, is as we develop and cultivate this sense of Bhutto in our lives, it means that we're not trying to become Buddhas as some kind of personal endeavor. That's missing the point. It's taking refuge always in the here and now, learning to trust this ability that each one of us has to pay attention in the present. And so in a retreat like this, we start out with the obvious, the sitting posture and the breath, because that's here and now. Then I suggest the use of this mantra Bhutto, because I'm trying to challenge this idea that you are somebody who needs to get something or do something. Because with meditation we can approach Buddhist meditation as I've got to get my concentration, I've got to get something I don't have, I've got to get rid of my wandering mind, of my defilements, and this is the sense of a self that has to get something. We're doing meditating in order to get something in the future, or get rid of something that we have that we don't want. Now, the Buddha's teaching is this direct. When we take the refuges, they in the very beginning, when you took the 3 refuges, that's a statement that whether it's just ceremonial or not, but actually what that is a statement that you're now in a refuge of enlightened awareness. Now, when you try to think about this from the ego level, it doesn't make sense, because the ego is not enlightened. The ego can never be aware of itself, but you can be aware that there's this Bhutto is aware of the ego. And so this is a reflection for observing, learning to no longer operate from the basic delusion of I have to meditate in order to get something or get rid of something, but to the attitude more of reminding yourself that being a human individual, this is a teaching for human beings. It's an ancient teaching that the Buddha, in his first sermon after his enlightenment, used this teaching, the Four Noble Truths, as his first sermon after enlightenment. And it's a very interesting approach the Buddha used, because he was pointing to something that we all recognize, suffering. Something that's nothing subtle about suffering, is there? We all can relate to that. Whether you're rich or poor, male or female, whatever age, young or old, suffering is the common bond we all have as human beings. And as creatures, because the animal world is suffering. Now the Buddha takes this very banal and ordinary human experience and puts it into a category of a noble truth. And this is very interesting, because Buddhism is the only religion that really does this. And in interfaith meetings in London, for example, you have now England, the British, UK is a kind of multi-religious society. It's no longer just Christian. There's so many Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, and all other forms of different types of religions that are present there. And so you have these interfaith meetings, trying to understand other religions. And of course, other religions don't quite get Buddhism, because, especially the theistic ones, like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, because they're always starting from the top, I believe in God, or a statement about the ultimate. And the Buddha is, his statement is a noble truth, not ultimate truth, that there is suffering. And so he's taking this most common human experience and placing it in it's the first noble truth after his enlightenment. It's a statement, there is suffering. There is dukkha. And then, and this is a noble truth. So what's noble about this truth is that we're changing our attitude from I suffer to there is suffering. Now notice the difference. I suffer because of this or that, because of you, because of the weather, because of my health and so forth. So we think of suffering as something we don't want, something that's caused by external sources. And then, but there's nothing noble in that. That's just how it seems to us in our ordinary way of thinking and conventional attitudes. But now the challenge is to awaken to there is suffering, which is not about blaming it on anybody or anything external, but recognizing it. There is this sense of anxiety about the future, or worry, or regret, or guilt about the past, or it can be very just on the level of worrying, or it can be very strong sense of being persecuted and then feeling angry and indignant by the way other people treat you or abuse you. So, like we can think that somebody who's somebody's abusing me, I think they're the cause of my suffering. But it's a noble truth. That person that is physically abusing me is, he's hurting this form. But my suffering is my aversion, anger, and resentment toward that person. See? So there's a difference between, if I just get caught in anger, hatred, and resentment, then I'm suffering from the abuse that somebody else is projecting toward me. But if I don't, if I use panya or wisdom, then I know, even though I'm being physically abused, I'm not creating suffering in my mind. So these are the ways of wisdom in which we can. Sometimes life does present us with unfair blame and abuse from others and whatnot, and then we think it's unfair, and on the ego level it's very painful, very hurtful, and the tendency is to think it's somebody else's fault. But in this way, we're changing to the noble truth, there is suffering, to observing our own not wanting, our way we are personally programmed or conditioned to hate somebody or resent. And that which knows these mental states is the Bhutto, knowing the Dhamma, the Dhammo, knowing the way it is, all conditions that you're experiencing, whatever condition you're experiencing now, whether it's physical, emotional, or mental, is, it can be pleasurable or painful, is impermanent, anicca. So this is a key word for investigating, investigating the way it is. And this is what we call vipassana meditation, which is insight, looking into the way things are. And then these Buddhist teachings, like the first sermon, the Four Noble Truths, is a very skillful means that the Buddha gave 2,552 years ago. And that's why at this time in modern Malaysia, this teaching applies, doesn't it? It's not about, some kind of exotic time in India in the past, or it's not about Indian culture or anything like that. It's about our human state. It applies to us in England, to everywhere, suffering and the end of suffering. And it's a timeless teaching because it applied to the conditions, the human people that the Buddha encountered in ancient India 2,552 years ago. And it still applies at this very moment, here in this salubrious venue in this very lovely country. We can still create endless suffering here. and then blame it on somebody, or blame it on oneself. So you see, during this time that we're on retreat here, these kind of reflections, I'll try to keep encouraging you and pointing. And the main emphasis is always this here and now Dhamma. Until we do need to be reminded, because the worldly mind, the conditioned ego, it's all about doing something now to get something in the future. And so I noticed when I've been living in the UK since 1977, so that's like over 33 years, and in that country, and the Buddhists there, for example, when I first went there, I noticed so many of them had, the British Buddhists that were keen on meditation, had still so many doubts, and some of them were very diligent and serious practitioners of various techniques that were available then in England. And one man, I remember, he was quite a retired solicitor, very gentlemanly, polite, urbane kind of English man who had practiced a meditation technique for 20 years, very strict kind of meditation technique. And then he came to me one day and he said, Ajahn Sumedho, I've been doing this for 20 years and I've got nothing from it. And he was in despair because, with all his good intentions and his determination, the basic problem had never been recognized. I'm doing this in order to get some result in the future. If I practice hard this technique over and over again, then I should get some reward for it or some insight in the future. So even after 20 years, even in his home, he had a shrine room, very lovely shrine room. And I know he was a very disciplined person, but this sense of despair, 20 years without any, and I've gotten nowhere, he said. And so I pointed out, he never really reflected on what he was doing. He had a kind of faith that in a technique or some idea that if he kept doing this, he would be rewarded in some way for doing it. And this is all the ego and the cultural conditioning operating, that we're so used to, so close to us, so identified with, we can't see it. And that's where these like the refuges, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, they're meant not to be identities or just merely exotic words or some kind of just Buddhist terminology, but they're actually skillful means to really get to the causes of suffering. It's not me, Ajahn Sumedho, that can be enlightened or get somewhere in my practice. It's through surrendering to Bhutto, to awareness, that Dhamma is recognized and understood. You see, so people ask me, what have you gained? 43 years as a Buddhist monk, and what put me in some category? Are you a Sotapanna? Are you a Sakadagami? Are you an Anagami? Are you an Arahant? And this kind of thing, because people see this as the ego operating, in terms of taking these terminologies and applying them as attainments, personal, individual attainment. But when you really contemplate the structure that the Buddha gave us in the Pali scripture, in the Pali Suttas, those teachings are not about attaining or achieving, but it's all about relinquishing through awareness. And so that as long as it's ignorance of Dhamma, no matter how good our intentions might be on a personal level, it will only take us so far, and then we can't go any further. It might be skillful and good and kusala, skillful Dhamma, but for liberation we need to break out of the conditioned assumptions we have into the immediate awareness of the here and now, and cultivate this. And this retreat is an attempt to encourage you toward this, and to keep reminding you, so that because you will forget and get caught up in your own scenarios and habits. But this is not trying to browbeat you into doing anything, but to encourage you to awaken and to trust, to begin to recognize what awareness is, and what the refuge is, and so you can really trust it and have confidence in it, so that after 20 years you're not saying, oh, I've been meditating diligently for 20 years and I'm nowhere. And it wasn't because it was the ego saying I'm nowhere, because he was expecting to be somewhere. But when, in terms of my own experience, I say, the personality, my personality, my ego, hasn't gotten anywhere. It hasn't changed that much. But the sense of understanding and this confidence in relinquishing increases. When you prove through investigation and see for yourself the peace that comes through letting go and relinquishing, then it's not personal attainment at all. I can't claim it as some kind of personal result of my efforts to meditate. It's like returning to that natural place we call the deathless reality. And rather than being so always deluded and limited by the death-bound conditions that we identify with. So Ajahn Chah would call this, in kind of ordinary language, our real home. And there's a nice little booklet out in English called Our Real Home. What is our real home? Is it Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur? For me, is it my real home in Seattle, Washington, or in Amaravati in England, or in Wat Papong in Thailand? Where do I belong? Where is my real home? And of course, when Ajahn Chah was talking about our real home, he was pointing here. And he always pointed to, watch your mind. In Thai, dujit. Observe. Be the awakened, conscious awakened being. So you investigate the conditions you're experiencing, not through identity or judgment, but through discerning them. And so the Bhutto is our ability to observe the changingness of conditioned phenomena, whatever its quality might be, pleasant, painful, whatever the conditions, whether it's the inhalation, exhalation, whether it's inspiration or despair, emotional conditions, that which is aware of conditions is not a condition. And so, just for convenience, we call that the Bhutto, and that's the refuge and the position we are taking now during this retreat, being this awareness rather than trying to be somebody who's getting somewhere in their meditation practice. So I'll just offer this as a reflection, and there will be time for discussions in the future. But I know this, this is many sometimes very difficult to understand, because it's going against the whole conditioning process of any culture. It's trying to, it's really, I see in my life how that, going against the stream of the world, of the assumptions of an ignorant society. And I find this even more so now, living in Europe, where it has stable government and even, the economy crash has not really affected us in the monastery. We wouldn't even know there's a problem. Like, people come and tell us. But but anyway, it is in terms of worldly conditions, it's a very nice country to live in, well run, fairly good economy. In the past, now maybe it's a bit having problems, but probably will, who knows what's going to happen. But even at best of times, the world is changing, society, we can see wherever we go now, there's this incredible migration of peoples, immigration, people moving from one place to another, world population, pollution, and all the doomsday predictions that are prevalent at this time. So it is a time where there is a lot of change and uncontrollable things that we we can worry about. But what we can do is cultivate this awareness, which will allow us to deal with what the conditions of the places we're living in, with the experiences that we have. We can do the chant before we dismiss. May I abide in well-being, in freedom from affliction, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may I maintain well-being in myself. May everyone abide in well-being, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will,
their future is born.